Hello, Dr. Mike here for lecture on chapter 12, which is the third lecture for week 2 of our class. And we want to talk today about politics, power, war, and peace as a part of cultural development. Maybe that's something you haven't thought about before, but in every society, no matter how large or how small, people face the challenge of how do you maintain social order? How do you secure safety? How do you protect property? And how do you deal with resolving conflicts? Anytime people live together in small or tight spaces, there are always going to be all of these issues that come up that have to be worked out. All human relations entail a great degree of power, if you will, which refers to the ability of individuals or groups to impose their will upon others and to make them do things even against their own wants or wishes. We have a long history of this, and it seems like that war and peace and politics and power have marked the human experience ever since the beginning of us living together. So you can well understand how important these ideas are when we talk about a culture. In the United States, we have a particular culture. We would generally say that we are a democracy. Technically, we are not. We are a republic. And there's a vast difference. In a democracy, every adult person in that community would be voting on everything, and the majority would always carry. In fact, in history, there's never been but one real democracy, and that was the city of Athens long ago. And there, every man or every adult man was able to vote, and simple majority rule. That is what the word democracy actually means. Demokritos means the people rule, demos, the people rule. We'd never get anything done if that were the case, and that was our government. But in return, we have a republic. In a republic, we literally elect and designate certain people, our senators and our congressmen, to go and to vote for us. That does not mean that they vote the way we would vote, but they definitely will vote on our behalf and try to make the very best decisions that they can possibly make. That is not an easy job, by the way. And even though, we divide up along lines of party and all these other things, and we swear the other party is terrible and we're wonderful, we're all dealing with human beings. And so you're always going to have that kind of an issue in politics. Politics is that process of determining who gets what, when, and how, that in a very basic sense. And the political process involves coalitions of individuals and groups that will group together based upon their own personal self-interest. Now, let's be honest, we all have our own self-interest. Some are more conservative than others, some are more liberal than others. Some want to see the government more powerful than maybe others do. They want to see it bigger. They want to see it doing more. And so there's all kinds of different questions that need to be answered in this. And so political organizations kind of grow up around that and evolve around that and become what we know today as the system in America by which we elect our leaders. There are different bands of people that even from the earliest days, people would band together based on their enlightened self-interest. They'd live together. They'd be around people. Say artists wanted to band together and live as an artist community, or hunters will live together as a hunter community. We don't call it that today, but it's still very much that way. I mean, your friends, the people you band together with, are the ones that you share interest with. It might be hunting, fishing, boating, running, playing tennis, whatever it is. Those are all examples of what we're talking about when we talk about bands. And then bands would form into a tribal network where they lived, protected each other, worked together on projects, gathered food together, all these things. We tend to think of tribes as being Native American here. But you have your own tribe, your family group, your work friends, whoever they are. You tend to band together, to do things together, to operate together. Maybe it's something as simple as buying a Costco membership as a family and all of you go and make use of that one membership to save money. That's in very simple terms a band or a tribe. Usually in past days, you had a chieftain. There was someone who was in charge. Somebody has to make decisions. The buck has to stop with someone. And so there were always chieftains or people, even from earliest times in Europe. You had lords, and before you had kings, you had princes and lords, people that were elevated, looked upon with importance. Maybe even in your family, you have that to a very limited degree. Maybe the father is the patriarch of the family, or the mother that you look to out of respect to help to make decisions. In the Native American world, it was a very matriarchal society. Women had great power in that world. It could even be principal chiefs. I think about one of the Cherokee principal chiefs in the 60s. Her name was Wilma Mankiller. You have to love the last name, but she was one of the more famous female chiefs of the Cherokee Nation. And then from those units, you will band together and you'll have like a state. In the Native American world, it might be the Iroquois, who were the nation, or the Cherokee, or the Creek, who are my own relatives, and so it gets larger based off those small cogs in the wheel. Politically, from your city council, your town council, those are the very basic elements of our society. If you want to get involved in politics, that's where most people start. They get elected to town council or city council. They get experience in making decisions, in dealing with people, and people can be terrible. One of the reasons most people don't get involved in the political world is because of the horrible way they get treated by people for whom they're working, and trying to make good decisions and sound decisions, and decisions that will equally apply to everybody. We cannot all have our way. And so you have to have somebody who makes the decision. Some types of states are much more coercive than others. If you went to a communist country, you went to a Nazi area of Germany, they would force people to conform. I was in Russia in 1990 under communism, and the things they were forced to do were unbelievable. You didn't get to choose where you lived in your where you lived or what you lived in. You were assigned an apartment. If you got a car, you were assigned a car. You were assigned a job and told where you worked every day. You didn't have any of those freedoms to go out and choose to do and to be. In fact, we have more freedoms in the United States than any other country in the world in how we live our lives, and that is a part of the democracy. That is the culture. That is the government that we have devised, that we work to protect. But you may be living in a place like Saudi Arabia, where women are not allowed to even show their hands or their ankles in public. They have to wear a burqa, which has a little slit at the eyes where you can see out, and you don't have the freedom to go in public without a minder. You have a driver. You don't get to drive your car. In fact, women in Saudi Arabia who protest their lack of rights will steal their husband's car and go tooling around Riyadh as a form of protest. But they don't have the rights to protest. They could get put in prison or even beheaded for being in rebellion against their government. Here we have the freedom to speak, to act, to do things as long as we're in the bounds of law. We have a wonderful system that is devised to give us maximum freedom. And so all these things, we're not coerced usually unless we're unlawful. And then you have to reposit authority somewhere. And so we give authority to our sheriffs, to our police, to our government, to pass laws, to make laws for the good of the people. That means you have to kind of give up some control in order to give control to everybody. So that's called cultural control. Within the culture, we make certain determinations that we're going to surrender certain things to the federal government, to the state government, to the local government to do for the good of the whole, rather than every one of us having to have a waterworks or every one of us having to have a sewer works. You can imagine how chaotic that would be. So we agree that there is a sewer authority that will handle all the sewage in our county or our town, and we don't have to do that. We may pay a fee for it, but we help them to do that. So that's about cultural control. All those things evolve into something that's very, very important, and that is that every one of us, we have a worldview. We have a particular way from our cultural background that we look at the world around us. Some people talk about a Christian worldview. If you are a Christian, you look at things in a particular way based upon your religious beliefs. Maybe you have an Islamic worldview. You base your worldview upon the Quran, upon the teachings of the Imam or Muhammad. Those worldviews will vary one from the other. Even people within the same family will have a few differences. Maybe your son is a little more liberal in his religious views than you are. Maybe he's a little more liberal in how he dresses, how he cuts his hair. He looks at the world very different. And so that's the beauty of our system, is that people do not have to be in lockstep, wear the same color clothing, do the same kinds of things in order to be in agreement. Now, the societies are different. The Amish, they dress a particular way. They reject electricity. They reject telephones. They use horse and buggies and don't use electrical cars. They coerce that, or they force it within their community to be in compliance with each other. So those are a lot of the differences. But it would do you well to sit down and think about just what your worldview is. How do you view the world? Do you view it through, every one of us wear a particular set of lens, if you will, through which we view the world. And we have to ask ourselves, what is our worldview? How do you look at things? How do you deal with things? How do you pay your bills? How do you do all those things? Our worldview is that overarching set of core values and ethics and viewpoint that we use in how we order the world that we live in. And this is really important. The idea of being able to sanction those who do not follow the general rules and the general guidelines are important. I mean, we sanction people that the Supreme Court sanctions people all the time. Somebody wants to do this or do that. It goes up through the ranks of the court system and they turn it down. They say, no, you can't do that. You can't put a garage in the middle of the interstate just for your car. Something that may be ridiculous, but that's kind of what a sanction is. And we have people that go to Washington to develop laws, not to be particularly onerous to one person, but laws that will fit and work together with everybody so that we can have law and order. People aren't stealing your stuff. They're protecting your property, protecting your life. We just recently, last week, went back as a federal government to carrying out the death sentences or executing criminals who have been, by a trial of their peers, sentenced to death. And we haven't done that in a number of years. Going back to that, there's a big argument over that. You may feel one way or the other. I might feel the same, or I might be the opposite. That's a part of our worldview. There are some people that don't believe you should take a life for any reason. And so we function within this society, whether we agree upon that or not. The other idea is the idea of genocide. You hear that word quite often today in other countries, and that is the wiping out of a people and destroying an entire race, trying to eradicate them. The most famous, probably in our lifetime, were the Hutu and the Tutsis in Africa who engaged in ethnic genocide, or in the 80s, the Kurds and the Serbs and the people from Kosovo engaged in ethnic cleansing, in which they went in and killed all the Muslim people of their community. Now, the United States is not without guilt in that area. That's exactly what we tried to do with the Native Americans. There actually was a move afoot in the 1800s to wipe them off the face of the earth. And we pretty much did. They went from being several millions of people at first discovery to well below that now, because we finally herded them into reservations, and we pretty well keep them in check still. We rounded up all the Japanese Americans at the beginning of World War II and put them in internment camps, took all their things away from And